And you should begin.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone to our final event for International Education Week. My name is Donna Anderson. I'm the Senior International Officer and Executive Director of the Global Engagement Office here at the University of Montana. We are wrapping up International Education Week, which is sponsored by the Department of State and Department of Education to celebrate international education worldwide. And it's a pleasure to have some time to talk with all of you about things happening here at the University of Montana as we are in the midst of and starting to come into whatever this new normal is going to be after the pandemic. Oh, let's see. Click here. There we go. So it's really no secret that COVID-19 has changed the landscape for international higher education, not only here in the United States, but worldwide. We have, as a result, needed to re-examine our practices. So when mobility shut down, we had to look at how are we continuing to deliver global education to our students when we can't move to other countries. And this has really accelerated changes in international higher education. Prior to the pandemic, there were just a few institutions here in the United States that were doing things like virtual exchange, collaborative online international learning. I think most campuses to some extent were focused on some kind of internationalization at home, embedding global education into the general education coursework, those kinds of things. But really, I think the focus then turned to what do we need to do when we don't have mobility to continue global education on our campuses. And I think in the past, there's sometimes been an assumption that internationalization equals mobility. And I think if anything, what the pandemic did was it forced us to really re-examine that and to say, you know, yes, mobility is an important part of global education worldwide, but it shouldn't be the only way that we're doing global education. And it also exposed the inequity that exists when all we do is focus on mobility, because not all students are able to travel abroad for whatever reason. It could be financial, it could be family commitments, it could be the major that they're studying. And so we needed to, you know, it was really a time for us to re-examine how we're doing things. So throughout this presentation, I'll highlight ways that we've innovated our internationalization efforts here at UM during the pandemic, and you know, talk about some of the advocacy that we're doing here on campus as a result of that. So here in the Global Engagement Office, we have 3 different areas. We have our education abroad programming, we have international students and scholar services, and we have our English Language Institute. So I want to start with talking a little bit about our English Language Institute. And this institute has been around since the early 1990s. It's been a really successful part of who we are here at the University of Montana. It's provided a way for not only international students to improve their English language skills so that they can continue on in degree-seeking programs, but also for exchange students to come for just a short period of time, or for refugee students that are here in our community to have an opportunity to improve their English language. So our English Language Institute, which is now under the direction of Sarah Schrader, really responded to the pandemic by broadening the scope of the portfolio of programs that it offers. It went from strictly in person to really offering a wide variety of remote, both asynchronous and synchronous type programming. And now that we are starting to have some return to mobility, We also have in-person opportunities that are returning. So this fall, we have students both in person and online in 2 different time zones. So we have students in Japan and students here in Montana, as well as our first student in UM's remote pathway program. And since last fall during the pandemic, we've had 86 Japanese students participate in English Language Institute virtual content themed programming, and 74 UM students serving as conversation partners for those students. So really, although the length of those programs has been shorter in duration, the reach of how many students we've been able to accommodate has expanded as a result of the pandemic. In spite of the pandemic, we also were able to welcome 15 Humphrey Fellows to UM's campus through the English Language Institute. They came in April and they stayed until August. And UM continues to be the only US university that provides a long-term intensive English language training to these Humphrey Fellows. So let's look now at some other ways that we've innovated in our English Language Institute recruitment. One of the things we did when mobility shut down is we started working with the US Commercial Services. The US Commercial Services located here in Helena provided an opportunity through a special promotion because of the pandemic to help our campus connect out with other markets around the world. So in particular, they helped us connect with the US Commercial Services in Japan, and we were able to market and promote our English Language Institute and the full spectrum of programs that it offers to the Japanese market. As a result of that, we have a new partnership with Conan Services, which has K-12 and university students that are starting to do both in-person and remote programming through our ELI. We also have continued to work with our state partnership in Kumamoto, Japan, to expand out our offerings, our virtual offerings, to other high school students. No, it's okay. So now we have, yeah, thank you. So we've also innovated in how we deliver global education to our students here on campus. Not just during this time of low mobility, but what we're putting into place is something that we want to continue even after mobility returns. And this is, again, part of trying to find ways to be more equitable in who has access to global education here on our campus. In the summer and fall of last year in 2020, we applied for a grant through the ACE, American Council on Education, along with our partner institution, Sophia University in Japan. And we were awarded a grant that allowed us to take a team here at UM and a team at Sophia University and go through the ACE COIL lab together. And as a result, this past fall, we had students from Professor Alessia Karpoka's theater and dance class that studied and collaborated with 44 students from Professor Murai's art history class at Sophia University. And both professors, Karpoka and Murai, led a 4-week module course embedded within an existing course on both campuses. And those students were able to work together to plan their own theatrical production using mood boards, and they were looking at Madame Butterfly. They focused the theatrical adaptations of the story, which was written by an American set in Japan and later adapted into an Italian opera. After they had cross-cultural debate of the theatrical elements and traditions, the students were assigned to groups and tasked with producing their own adaptations of the story. So as a result of this, our provost office has invested $5,000 this current year to help us launch our University of Montana online virtual exchange program, UMove. And through that grant, we're able to support a stipend for faculty to go through a workshop and develop a COIL module in one of their existing courses, as well as receive instructional support and support from the Global Engagement Office to help them foster and find partner institutions. So let's move on to education abroad and international programs and innovations that have happened in this area the past year. So our education abroad and partnerships under the direction of Mariam Khoury Chowdhury has innovated and created virtual town halls to promote exchange partnerships, as well as virtual study abroad fairs. We found actually the pandemic, instead of lessening our communication and collaboration with our partners, has actually strengthened it. We have found that, you know, the telework that was happening was actually conducive to having after-hour meetings and with colleagues in different time zones. And because of that, we've been able to keep those relationships really close. We've also continued to form new institutional partnerships. In fact, this past year, we had 2 new institutional partnerships that started, one in the Netherlands and one in Mexico. We continue to receive exchange students, although in smaller numbers. We also continue to have students receiving prestigious scholarships like the Gilman and the Fulbright Scholarship. And throughout the pandemic, we really made, the EA team really made efforts to communicate with a lot of transparency with students. We had students who were abroad in the spring of 2020 who had to suddenly come home because of the pandemic. We had some students who hadn't left yet, who had to defer their education abroad experience. And then many students had to defer for multiple semesters. Through all of that, Maria and McKenna and the team really worked closely in their communications with those students so that they knew what was happening. They knew when the likelihood was that they might be able to go abroad again. The good news is that through the efforts of this group and the International Travel Review Committee, we now have a very robust review process in place. And we have the ability now to start sending students abroad again. So reopening international travel for our students, faculty, and staff. And this fall semester, we currently have 9 students abroad. This spring, we'll probably have between 30 and 40 abroad. So it's good to see that mobility starting to return, while also knowing that we need to continue to support our internationalization at home efforts. This slide shows you a little bit more about the process for reopening international travel and study abroad. Again, this was a heavy lift. It continues to be a heavy lift for this team. It started in the fall of 2020. When Maria and her team started the arduous task of planning how UM would restart international mobility, again, looking at that nuanced review system through the International Travel Review Committee, and doing a lot of outreach and advocacy with the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education here in Montana. So the steps that we took for reopening mobility included a program-specific review of all education abroad programs, developing decision-making metrics with recommended thresholds for go or no-go decisions. This used a multifactorial approach that considers, for example, host country and host partner COVID dynamics, travel, and border restrictions. For this current fall, the International Travel Review Committee reviewed 23 programs. Some were pending reduction below a CDC level 4, which at that time, there was travel restrictions to CDC level 4 put in place by OCHI. And there were 3 programs that were not approved, and 36 programs that were we reviewed for spring of 2022. Let's talk a little bit about innovation with campus and community engagement here at UM. Our engagement with the UM and the Missoula communities has innovated as well during the pandemic. We've had more than 1,000 people from over 20 countries and 10 US states who participated in our virtual World Fest days this past April. We did hold the event completely virtual because of the pandemic. We have, in the past year, really ramped up our Global Engagement Office newsletters. We have a monthly newsletter that goes out that shares all of the latest news about happenings both within GEO, but really across campus and in the broader community as it pertains to international initiatives. International Students and Scholars also has a frequent newsletter that communicates events and special announcements to our international students and scholars. We've also had engagement through UM Today, which is our local newsletter here on campus. And we've also, I guess the International Student and Scholar Office, which is under the direction of Caroline McLean, faced a lot of challenges during the pandemic, a lot of them having to do with immigration regulations that impacted our students and scholars here this past year. And our International Students and Scholars Office is the compliance office here on our campus that allows our university to issue documents to students that they then use to apply for their non-immigrant student or scholar visa. Some of the challenges that were faced and overcome by this office in the past year included presidential transition, which meant a barrage of executive orders that directly affected international student statuses, travel bans, consulate and embassy closures, which impacted student and scholar ability to get visas, inconsistent and contradictory student and exchange visitor program COVID-19 guidance, and a backlog for US citizenship and immigration services visa processing. I'm really proud to say that our ISS office responded very quickly and robustly to all of these challenges. They put into place advocacy efforts, including at the national level. They participated in grassroots campaigns with elected representatives, attended immigration advising seminars, and did regular outreach through Zoom advising with our international students and scholars. So after a really difficult fall in 2020, we were excited to have 53 new international students, 35 degree seeking and 18 exchange who joined us here on campus this fall. Our census enrollment numbers for non-immigrant international students was 129 students here on campus this fall. It's also really important to point out the international student fee waiver, which we're very grateful we have access to here on our campus, made it possible for so many of these students not only to come to UM, but to be retained and to complete their degrees here. Another area where we have innovated in spite of the pandemic is through our grants. GEO supported multiple successful grants during 2020-2021. we were fortunate to receive 2 NSF IRIS grants. One of them is actually being implemented right now. It's conservation training from indigenous perspectives in India. Professor Bozak and Thomas are the PIs on that grant, and that one was awarded $281,000. We received a 100,000 Strong in the Americas grant. That one was supported by Professor Unterschutz to Mexico for indigenous students in the amount of $25,000. Of course, the ACE COIL VE Collaborative Lab grant that I mentioned earlier, and then the Humphrey Fellows grant for $243,000. The Global Engagement Office has also really put a lot of time and energy into working through ways that we can be more inclusive, not only in our outbound programs, but also here on campus, and being a good ally and a good campus partner for our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. This is a top priority for us and permeates our priorities for the year. One of the things that we have done since the pandemic is to create an Identities Abroad website to demonstrate a support and inclusive environment for each student on campus, both pre and post and while studying abroad. We've also reached out to ASUM to set up meetings with diverse student groups to begin dialogue and relationship building. Here in the International Center, we have made both of our restrooms all gender bathrooms. And the branch, we also invited branch student leaders to be on a panel for our retreat this fall. As far as innovation for our global center concept here, we did get approval from President Bodner and Provost Humphrey to move forward with the creation of a global center. We are looking at what might be possible now with the resources that we have available to us. One of the exciting things that's happening is that our colleagues who are over in the Global Engagement Office in Lummenson Center are going to be co-locating with the Global Engagement colleagues here in the International Center. So we will have the whole team physically here in the International Center building. We'll be moving forward with doing more targeted outreach and programming to pull people together into this space or other spaces on campus, and to move forward with more collaboration and synergy as a campus around our internationalization efforts. As far as international student recruitment, our colleagues, although the recruitment does not reside, the responsibility for recruitment does not reside with the Global Engagement Office, we partner closely with the admissions office. Brigitte Lee in particular assists us with this. And some of the things that Brigitte is working on this year include digital outreach to different specific markets around the world, participating in Education USA virtual fairs, some targeted digital advertising through recruitment partners that we work with, putting in place the virtual 360-degree campus tour on the webpage, and limited test advertising in through our recruitment fair markets. For example, we're working on seeing which markets might be interested in a 2+2 pathway program through Missoula College, exploring a PharmD program with Canadian markets, and looking at combined pathway programs for degree in 3. Here are some of the markets that Brigitte is currently looking at, and we are as well through our ELI recruitment efforts. So Canada, we mentioned, Vietnam in particular for the 2-year college pathway programs. We work with Apply Board in India for recruitment. India is actually one of the markets that we are seeing now just recently an increase in undergraduate international students coming to the US. Many markets are actually dropping off or lowering for undergraduate recruitment to the US, in part because those middle class, where the middle class was growing in a lot of the global South, the pandemic has really had an economic impact on them. And so we're not seeing those markets coming back as strong here post or as we move out of the pandemic. Some other areas to note, Brigida is working on a dedicated international student communications plan, efficiencies in international admissions, processing and evaluations, as well as other opportunities. The other thing to note here is the strategic enrollment planning process is underway on campus, and there is a group that will be focusing on international student recruitment and putting forward ideas for how to move forward with that particular effort. So that concludes just my remarks, but I want to open it up for any questions or thoughts, anything as you were listening to the presentation. And I'll take this off of screen sharing.
Can you explain more about the 2+2 program?
Yes, so the 2+2 program, particularly, so Vietnam is one of the markets that we talk about that understands what the two-year degree, the affordability and the value of the two-year degree as a way to save money and then be able to transfer on to complete the four-year degree. So if we can find a way to create a pathway for international students and show, they could complete the four-year degree in 4 years and what the costs would be and what the cost savings would be. This is something that Brigida could take out or work with our, some of the agents and other recruitment, educational recruitment companies that we're working with.
Where does UMove go from here? Does it look like it's going to be up within 2022 or later?
Yeah, so UMove is actually up and running. We have a website. We have 2 faculty members that are teaching a climate change course this spring they got the grant for this year. So they will be implementing that collaborative online learning module in their course for spring. And I think they're actually working with 2 international partners for that course. And then we will be giving doing another faculty workshop for UMove we partner with UOLD, the Office of, oh boy, help me out, Organizational Leadership, OOLD, Development and Leadership Development. That will be on February 2nd from 12 to 1 p.m. So if there are any faculty who are interested in learning more about collaborative online learning, that would be a good workshop to attend. And then we'll also be talking about how to apply for the grant at that point.
Fantastic. Can I ask one follow-up question? For any faculty members who are interested in looking into building some sort of collaborative online partnership, or maybe a partnership exists and they want to navigate towards that, do they have to go through UMove, or should they still work with our office? Like, what are their steps?
Yeah, so some faculty already do have established relationships with existing international partners. We have over 80 partnerships worldwide. So there are some faculty that already have them developed. So they may not have to rely on our office as much if they already have that developed. But if they want to learn how to use the COIL methodology, then we would recommend they attend the workshop I know last year when we did the workshop, we also had it available afterwards as a video that they could view. And if they need instructional design support, the grant, of course, would help cover the cost of that, but they can do that on their own as well. We don't yet have an official process put in place to capture all of those as they come up. Some of them, I would say, there certainly have been faculty that have done probably not the technical COIL methodology, which is at least one course here, one course abroad, don't have to be the same discipline at all. As a matter of fact, if it's interdisciplinary, it makes it more rich. There have been faculty that have been doing, for example, maybe a guest speaker from a partner institution joining the class remotely. But I don't think there's been the true COIL where they have shared learning outcomes, that it's very intentionally designed in advance. The two faculty are working together to make sure that there's a collaborative piece of a project, for example, that the students would be engaging in together. Alessia's course last fall is probably the first one that I'm aware of that has occurred like that on our campus. So as we grow this program, we would like to track that. And my hope is that not just here at UM, but nationally and internationally, we start counting those kinds of experiences alongside the mobility experiences, and that we give them equal weight. I think when we start to do that is when we'll start to see some better, broader support for it and more sustained support for kind of internationalization at home efforts like COIL.
I love it. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. So thank you all, and thank you all for participating in International Education Week. And if you want to share this with anyone, we'll have the video available on our website later. So please let others know. But thank you all so much for joining us.